Hey, welcome to How It's Done, a podcast for curious marketers. I'm Kriste. I'll be your host, and I'm really glad you're here. Hello, curious marketers. I am super stoked about today's guest, the ubiquitous Colin Hung with Swaay.Health. Welcome, Colin.
Hey, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. You know, it's that time of year. It's healthcare conference season. So really, who better to have on the show than the man making the healthcare conference rounds, bringing us great coverage from so many of them. I know our listeners are curious. They want to know how to get attention for their brands and their thought leaders at all these trade shows, specifically how to grab the attention of the media and how to make the most of their time. And of course, all that swag, pink socks.
Pink socks indeed.
Pink socks. So, Colin, once again, thank you for making the time in between all these shows to be here with me on the How It's Done podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm truly excited to be here. I listened to the show. It's fantastic. You have great guests. So I'm honored to be here.
Well, you are now among one of those great guests. So I'll give a little background, for our listeners, and then I'll let you tell your own story here in a minute. But yeah, Colin is an award-winning healthcare marketer with more than 25 years of experience. He has led marketing efforts of several HIT companies, all of which have gone on to be acquired. Congratulations. Colin is currently the chief editor at Swaay.Health, a publication dedicated to healthcare marketing. And he's an editor at Healthcare IT Today. Doing a great job, I might add. Colin attends over 40 conferences a year, so that definitely makes you an expert, Colin. But I would love it if you would just dive in and tell us a little bit more about yourself. What's the story of Colin?
Wow, that's I don't think we have enough time for that.
Loaded question.
Or maybe your listeners might be bored, but I usually say that I am a recovering salesperson. So it's been 25 years since I've last sold something. So, but 25 years I've been in the marketing side of the house and love it. I love healthcare. I love marketing. It's such an exciting field to be in. And I truly do feel lucky to be working in it every day because the people are just amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
a lot of great people, a lot of smart people. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. I mean, everyone in healthcare is just so genuine, so warm, so caring. It's great to be part of this industry. So yeah, I mean, if you had told me I would be part of the media 5 years ago, I probably would have laughed at you. I thought I'd never be part of the media. I'm not a trained journalist. I'm a marketer. I just write content for companies. But after the last company I was with was acquired, I found myself kind of in between, and I thought I was going to take a break for 6 months and find myself finally, right? Maybe go to Europe and do that European tour that I never got a chance to. And my friend John Lynn called up and said, "Hey, well, if you're not doing anything, do you want to help me organize the conference that you keep coming to all the time?" And I was like, "Oh, sure." And that was 5 years ago. So
that was the predecessor to the Swaay.Health conference.
Absolutely, that's right. It used to be called the HITMC conference,
Yes.
and we rebranded last year to Swaay. And so that's the conference that I helped my friend John to organize, and then one thing led to another, and here I am now on the media side. And so I also joke with people to say I am now a professional conference goer because that feels like my job.
No kidding. So no formal media training. It's just one of those things that just kind of happened, and now this is your career. But I would argue that there's a bit of selling, that you're still doing on a daily basis.
I am selling ideas, not products and concepts. Yes.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Well, you have to tell us a little bit more about Swaay.Health. I would love to know a little bit about the rebrand and kind of what you went through with that. I want to know why there are 2 A's in Swaay.Health. And, for listeners, God forbid they don't know who you are, what you're about. Tell us more about Swaay.Health and the brand and what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Swaay.Health is Swaay with 2 A's, right? I think the reason why we picked 2, everyone asks us why are there 2 A's. We're like, Well, we just wanted to be sophisticated, and having two dots above the A, we didn't know how to pronounce that, so we just put two A's in the name. So we said, yeah, it's Swaay.Health.
It's very
Um,
cool.
I was joking with you earlier. I think we were channeling the Fonz for those that are of a certain age and remember that show. But the how the name came about was, we wanted to pick a name that was related to healthcare, to marketing, and we had been called the HITMC community, but was very IT centric, and we found
Mhm.
ourselves getting more and more onto the provider side, the medical devices, payers were getting involved in the community. So we said we needed a more comprehensive, more open name, and the name that we went through a whole bunch of names, but eventually the word we kept coming back to was persuade. But
Oh,
persuade health sounds really weird, right? Like it's sort of it didn't really function as a publication name, and so we kept talking about it, and then we very basically a derivation of that persuade was sway, like to sway somebody. And so that's how we ended up with the name Swaay.Health. So it is a publication. It is 100% dedicated to healthcare marketing. And we have stories from the marketing field, from people who work at provider organizations, people who work at health IT organizations, people who work at payer organizations. So it really is all about the latest trends, tips, tactics, success stories from the world of healthcare marketing.
okay. And would you call it, is it like an outgrowth of Health IT Today, or what's the relationship there?
Yeah, so Healthcare IT Today is a sister publication. It's the one we started, and that's the one that John started years and years ago.
Mhm.
That publication is dedicated 100% to the technology side, the IT side of health IT. So there we cover stories like cybersecurity, interoperability, all those kinds of things. Whereas on the Sway side, and it's a sister publication, it is more around the marketing tactics and strategies and processes and so forth, and more around patient engagement on this side. So the two are under the same umbrella company, but they're
Mhm.
very distinct publications.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And I never put two and two together about sway being part of swaying some opinion or persuasion or persuade. So that's really interesting. I'll never forget that. Thank you. Next question I have for you. Okay, conferences, trade shows, they seem to be completely back in full swing post pandemic, like finally. Would you agree? And then, kind of layering onto that, what kind of trends are you seeing out there in the exhibit halls so far?
Great question. Definitely 2024 feels like the year back from the pandemic. Like this is now we're like, okay, this feels like 2019. This feels like 2018 again. And just in terms of the number of attendees, the energy, the excitement, I think it took a long time, especially for healthcare, to recover financially, to have the wherewithal to actually go to a lot of events, right? So, it's budget. And then also, yeah, I think now we're kind of used to getting back into bigger crowds, right?
Hmm.
And I think if you follow the technology cycles, we're kind of 4 years after the pandemic, sort of, and now everyone's like, well, it's kind of the time I got to replace a certain technology, or maybe looking for something new, and so people are coming back to the conferences again. So that seems to span across whether it's an IT conference or whether it's a clinical conference or whether it's an association. Everyone I've been talking to is just saying, wow, 2024 just feels like the year that, it feels full again. It may not be back to the numbers. Certainly,
Hmm.
some people are still saying the numbers are still down from the 2019 highs, but just the feeling of the conference is good.
Yeah. I think a really interesting example of that is I heard you talk about it, and I heard a lot of other people talk about it as well, that this year's hymns was kind of felt a lot more like the old hymns because there were some interesting, few years there, and a lot of people, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, a lot of people thought that Vive was just going to put hymns out of business and it wasn't going to, it's the nail in the coffin of hymns, but it sounds like that is not the case. And this year, is really, there was a lot of energy and a lot of great engagement and conversations, is what I heard about that. And I'm curious what you think about that in general. Are we going to continue to see that kind of competition, like a Vive and a hymns, and people who put on these shows, they stand to make a lot of money from it. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
I think, first of all, anybody who thought that hymns was just going to, fade away is mistaken, right? Like it is the conference that has been going on for decades now. People still go there to find solutions. Vive is great and HIMSS is great. And I think there's room for both.
There's room for both, it sounds like, right?
But maybe not a week apart, but there's room for both. And I think they serve very different purposes. And I think over time we'll see more and more of that distinction where each will move in different directions. And I think that'll be a good thing for the industry. But for right now, it is a lot of overlap, and there is a lot of complaining about, should I go to one or the other? I think really it's what you want to get out of the show that really would determine which one you're going to find more value at. But certainly at HIMSS, this was the first year where I actually had to once again practice dodging around people in the main exhibit hall aisles, because it was so crowded where there were so many people standing and talking that you couldn't walk in a straight line. Whereas in years past, post-pandemic, you could walk straight because the aisles were fairly clear. This was the first year where you couldn't do that. So definitely that brought an energy, a buzz, and I think and I also think as well. HIMSS was physically just a bit smaller than it had been in the past, but I think that helped make it feel more full, right? So the exhibit hall itself, no doubt, there was one hall missing, right? It used to go all the way down to the end of the Orlando Convention Center. There was one hall that wasn't occupied, but because of that, it just made everything feel more tight and more like 2019.
Sometimes you got to scale back,
Yeah, agreed.
That's awesome. Well, you do a really cool thing where, you really analyze booths and you give like who had the best booth at the conference, and these brands spend so much money and so much time on these booths. I mean, some spend millions of dollars, on their presence and on their booths. Others don't have those kind of dollars. So what kind of, when it comes to booth design, what do you think attracts attention and what is just a waste of time?
Oh, see, that's a loaded question because I think there are actually two very distinct things to answer that. So to attract people to your booth, I think actually has almost nothing to do with the physical design of your booth anymore.
Oh, tell me more.
So, and the reason why I say that is because when we talk to the CIOs that we talk to, when we interview the leaders of companies, when we talk to the people who are even VPs and directors at healthcare organizations, the very people that, you're trying to attract, very rarely do we hear them say, oh, I'm just going to tour through the exhibit hall and find something. They're all like, no, I've got 5 people I need to meet. We had set up meetings beforehand. I'm just going to go see those 5. And then maybe like if I see someone next to them, maybe I'll stop by if it was interesting, but I'm just in here for like these 5 vendors and I'm gone. I'm out. Right? I haven't got time to wander the HIMSS exhibit hall. Right. So
great point.
So what I mean by that is to attract people to your booth, you have to do all the pre-work. Right. Which has nothing to do with the design of your booth. It has everything to do with, getting to that right person and making sure that, you have a good sales team and good sales follow-up process and all those kinds of things. And it has nothing to do with whether or not you have a backlit panel or whether you have a spinning thing on the top of your booth. So to attract people to your booth, I think it requires all that legwork. And so when I talk to people and people ask me, what attracts people to your booth? And I will usually say the fact that they're in your funnel and you're following up with them is what will bring people to your booth the most.
That is a really great point.
And also things like what I call booth attractors. So a lot of booth styles now will have a small little theater area, right, where you can sit down and listen to a talk, maybe get a demonstration live. Those are the types of things that attract people to the booth now, as much as the spinning wheel where you can win a prize, or the DeLorean that's sitting in your booth, or the race car. And those are still effective too. But I think more and more people are pre-planning how they're going to go through the exhibit hall. And it's less and less about just wandering and something catching your eye.
I got it. So are those things a waste of time or money? That's the next question. One thing you talked about, I saw your report where a lot of people were, having like LED, signs that were really eye-catching, and then signs hanging from ceilings. That those were some of the new sort of trends you were seeing out there.
Yeah, and I think it's related to what we just were talking about. if you think about, if I'm an executive, I've got 10 meetings to get to, and I didn't need to get to a certain person's booth, well, I'm probably not going to remember the booth number, right? But I can look up and say, oh, like there's the company. I can see it from across the hall. Now I know where to go, or I know generally what direction to go in. So I think we're going to see actually more and more effort being put into those hanging signs. I think in the past, all they were simply like the logo on a white backdrop, maybe lit, maybe not. Still so many of them that are not lit, which I don't understand why. But the ones at HIMSS and Vive that really stood out were the ones that had something else going on. They were brightly colored. They had some sort of LED. They were almost like billboards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually going to be a new battleground for standing out. Is if you have a sign like that. GE for years and IBM for years were the ones that had the biggest, brightest, LED boards up there, and you could never mistake who it was that was
Yeah.
underneath those. Because you can see them from across the hall, right? So that was definitely a trend I saw at HIMSS, was way more hanging signs than ever before. They are expensive, so don't get me wrong. This is not something you would do if you had a 10 by 10 booth. But for larger organizations, I think that's going to be money well spent on attracting people and making sure that people know, oh, like this is where we are.
That is awesome. Really great tips and observations. And what other kind of tips and strategies do you have for companies to really maximize the return on investment at a conference? For example, if all you do have is a 10 by 10, which there's a lot of companies that, that's a big investment for them. And nothing says they can't be just as successful on lead generation, as the folks that are spending millions on their booth. So I'm kind of curious what else, maybe you have to share.
Yeah, and that's a great question. One that we get asked a lot as well. I think with a 10 by 10, you can be very, very successful. You don't have to have a large booth. In a 10 by 10, obviously you can't have a meeting space, you can't have a theater and those kinds of booths, but you can do other really interesting things. First of all, you can make your 10 by 10 booth very welcoming. A lot of people make the mistake of putting the table right at the front of their 10 by 10 and the backdrop at the back. And you basically have this 10-foot space where you're standing in. Only you can stand in, and everyone has to walk up to your table. Walking up to a table is very intimidating. Most hotels have realized this, right? If you've checked into a hotel recently, they no longer have these giant registration desks. They have these little tiny kiosks, and the person comes out from behind the desks and welcomes you and greets you to check you into the hotel. Even car dealerships are doing this now. I would take a cue from them. Banks, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Retailers. Yeah. Like, do not put your table right at the front of your booth, right? Put it at the back or on the side and make it welcoming. And I think that's one very simple thing that you can do to have a more effective exhibit presence. And then, the other thing, physically that you can do for your booth is just make sure it's very simple and very to the point. Because you only have a 10 by 10. It's not a lot of real estate. You can't waste it with a lot of words, because I'm not reading them all. Right?
No, nobody's reading those words.
Exactly. I may be glancing it. I may be walking past. So you really want to make sure that, like a billboard, it's got max 10 words on it. And it tells me what you do, what you are, what problem you're solving. And don't waste any time on like the best or like, number one in this. And like, that doesn't tell me anything, right? Like, we solve.
It's sort of like world's best coffee,
Yeah.
It's like meaningless.
Right. The most important about it is coffee, right? So yeah, use less words, get bold in terms of coloring and so forth. Those are all things that will attract people to that 10 by 10. But again, I think it really boils down to the pre-work, like making sure that you're setting up those meetings, making sure that, if you can, send out those social posts to say, hey, we're going to be here. Who else is going to be there? Look in your own funnel, right? And just say, hey, we're going to be at this show. Are you going to be there? If you are, we'd love to see you, right? We're going to be here at booth number 456, and we'd love for you to stop by and win this prize or check out our new announcement or whatever it is that you're doing there. But you have to do all that work to really get a good return on your investment at any conference, whether it's large or small.
Yeah. And those are that doesn't really cost much of anything to do those things, right? That's really kind of the basics.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's what certainly I'm seeing now is, pre-pandemic, I think there was some, extra money floating around and you could do some fancy things with booths and things like that. I think post-pandemic, people are realizing, hey, let's be smart with our dollars And I think it's really focusing on these basics that are really going to help you the most with smaller footprint booths.
That's great advice. What about kind of shifting gears? What should PR and marketing pros consider when they're pitching or attending a conference? Because, well, there's what should they consider? But also, like, is it your experience that there's far fewer media that are really, kind of there on site for these trade shows? Or are you seeing a change there too?
Well, I mean, it's been fun to go to the media rooms and, see colleagues and things like that. But the number of colleagues that we see has started to decline. There aren't as many outlets. A lot of us, there's a consolidation happening as much in the media space as there is in any other. So there aren't as many dedicated healthcare media outlets as there once were. So definitely there's a smaller pool of media and therefore smaller numbers of media. But also some of the bigger outlets, the Forbes of the world, those types of outlets, they no longer have permanent healthcare writers or healthcare editors. They'll hire a local freelance person and say, hey, listen, the HIMSS is going to be in Florida. You're based in Orlando. Can you just go and cover the event, and find us 4 or 5 stories that we can then publish, right? So, it's good that they're still there, but they just don't have the same wherewithal as they once did when they had like a healthcare editor on staff. But also very much like the way, all the pre-work goes in to set up meetings. That's the same thing that's happening with press. A lot of times these larger press organizations will have the 10 interviews already lined up before they even get to the show. They go in, they do the 10 interviews, and then they're gone. They're out. They're not staying for the 4 days of the conference anymore.
Yeah. And that being the case, like, how do you break through the noise? If you're a PR professional, and trying to get the attention, for your client, like, how do you even do that? You must get hundreds. I know you do.
Yeah.
I know you get hundreds of inbounds and press releases and who knows what else you get over there. But how do you decide, who to talk to or what to cover?
And I'll make a plug for HIMSS on this one. So every year, HIMSS, the last couple of years, HIMSS has asked us to present to their sponsors or to anybody in the exhibit hall how to attract press. And one of the things we highlight to them, because we do the analysis every year, how many pitches we get, what days we get them, and where they come from. And it's amazing to see. Everyone's flabbergasted. We get about 700 to 1,000 pitches ahead of an event like HIMSS.
I believe it. And probably like really far ahead, all the way up to like day before.
Exactly. So your question is very appropriate. Like, how do you cut through the noise? And the answer to that is there's actually very simple things you can do, but it's still not going to cut through the noise completely. And what I mean by that, some simple things you can do, obviously personalization is the far best thing you can do with your pitch. And what I mean by that is not just making sure that you put my name correctly in the hello line or the dear line.
Helps.
It does help. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does help. But it's more like, hey, Colin, we met like last year at HIMSS and, we had an ice cream together, or, hey, we stood in line at Starbucks together. Maybe you might be interested in this company that I'm, bringing forward to you. So that one little line about some shared experience we had, more than, hey, we were just at HIMSS together, that will trigger a memory and go, oh yeah, I remember that person, right? And so now I'll read your press release. I'll read what you sent me because I feel like obligated. I have to do that, right? So that really works. So my advice, first of all, for any PR person out there, take the time to go and meet and try to meet the editors that you want to try and get earned placements with, right? So that means hanging outside the media room, and as people are exiting the media room, introduce yourself, right? Or set up a meeting where it's just coffee. There's not a pitch. It's just more, hey, I want to get to know you a little bit. I don't have anything to pitch you right now, but down the road, I just want to make sure what I do pitch matches what you cover. And that's the second key. I can't tell you, I got like 40 pitches for pharmaceutical companies. And I'm like, I've never written a pharmaceutical article ever, right? But I got those. And so I'm not going to listen to them no matter how much personalization you do. So really spending the time to match the coverage, like what you're pitching to how they cover the market that's really how you're going to stand out. So yeah, and realizing that, for example, myself, I cover a lot of patient experience stories. I talk a lot about rebrand stories. I talk a lot about, improving the outcomes for patients. That's what I tend to cover a lot on. So if you got a story around that, I'm probably listening. If you've got a study, I'm probably listening, right?
Yes, yes. I'm curious what gets your attention about a rebrand story. Like, what
Well,
do you like to
it's
know most about a rebrand story?
I think like brand stories. I mean, every brand is unique. Every rebrand story is unique. And having gone through a few of them, I have a soft spot for how tough it is to pull off. So I'm always curious to listen to and hear some of the challenges that a person going through a rebrand has had to overcome. I'm always curious to know how it's been received by like executives, by partners, by customers. I'm always interested in what was the spark? Like what caused the rebrand in the first place? Was it just,
Mhm.
was tired? Was it something else? So I love those kinds of stories only because I've lived through them. So I'm always curious.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, understanding where Swaay.Health came from. There's almost always a really good story behind a rebrand, even if it ends up being, because this happens a lot. Companies will spend an awful lot of money on a rebrand, and then it's just a slight tweak, but it's still a difference, and there's still a story behind that. So that's cool. I'm glad to know your kind of your perspective on that.
Yeah, and no, as now that people know it, hopefully I'll get a few more of those pitches, is what I'm saying.
You will, I guarantee it. Well, I'll put money on it. I know I'm going to pitch you a few more.
And
Um,
I look forward to that.
we kind of talked a little bit already about some of the biggest changes, pre-pandemic to now. Does anything else kind of stand out for you?
You
No,
know,
can I call out one thing that you did say you reported on? Like nobody was wearing masks at HIMSS. There was no sanitizer in the, like public areas. I found that pretty interesting and a little surprising.
you did your homework. Yes. So one of the strangest trends is that, yeah, at all the healthcare conferences I've gone to, there isn't an over presence of hand sanitizer and masks because it's a healthcare conference, right? Um, it is just whatever the hotel, whatever the venue offers, right? And so they're still there. I'm not saying there isn't any, but much less prevalent than I would have thought being a healthcare specific show, like a healthcare specific conference. And it's almost like we just don't want to remember
Right.
2020 and 2021, right? So we
It's
don't
like,
want to be
no, we already
reminded
solved
of
that problem.
exactly. So I think there's a little bit of that, and so that was just something that struck me as like, wow, like we went from like masks every 2 feet, sanitizer every 3 feet, and everyone giving away sanitizer to like nobody's wearing a mask except on the airplane, right? Like, and even then it's
Yeah.
sporadic.
Were people
So
still giving away hand sanitizer?
there are a few, but not as nearly as many as the last few years where that was
Right.
like that was a hot ticket item.
It's like mask
Um,
and sanitizer fatigue.
yeah, I think there's a little bit of that setting in, and it's funny because I think also in healthcare we kind of do know the value and the power of the vaccinations and those kinds of things. So I think people are much more comfortable going, okay, well, I know that even if I get it, I'm probably not going to get hospitalized now.
Right.
The vaccines are so good, so I think there's reason why there isn't as much. But it was just again surprising that
Hmm.
given it's a healthcare conference, I would have thought there would at
Yeah.
least be a few more.
Yeah. No kidding. Well, I think that's a great segue to swag.
Mhm.
What are you seeing out there? Trends in swag, or companies? Do you think companies are like tightening their budgets or, should they be spending money on swag? It's kind of like it's a cool thing and you kind of almost have to have it. But then also, like, as a participant, you're like, I'm not taking all this stuff home. I don't even have room in my bag and I don't need more stuff. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, this to me is also an endlessly fascinating topic, right? Well, what's the swag? And one of our favorite things to do at the end of a conference is to do that recap of, who had the best booth, who had the best swag, and yeah, it is pretty interesting to see what companies give away, right? Like most people will give away pens and those notebooks and that's always perennially popular. The most popular item right now is socks. I mean, I think every other booth is giving away some sort of branded socks or not even branded socks, just fun socks, right?
Yeah. Who started
Uh,
that trend?
I don't know. I mean, I would love to say it was Nick Atkins with pink socks that he started it, but I think it was also a trend in other industries, right? In the gaming industry and other industries. It is a nice way to inconspicuously portray your brand because not everyone sees socks, right? You only can see the logos and the branding when you sit down, cross your legs. Those. So it's subtle, right? It's not like
Yeah.
something that you wear and it's in your face. So I think for that reason, it's a natural clothing item that lends itself well to healthcare because in healthcare we don't want to be walking billboards.
Yeah. Hey, you know what I would say about that though? Because I've gotten some of the socks and I've been like, oh, this is great. I'm going to get those socks. But then they're not quality socks. And then you're like, ugh, that's like, ooh, they made me mad. This brand is making me mad. I'm going to have to throw these
Well,
socks away because they suck. So like, if you're going to do it, invest in some really, some quality socks. That's my opinion.
no, and you've hit the trend right on the head. The trend is towards quality giveaways,
Ah,
not the 10-cent items. I recently went to the PPPC show, the promotional products industry, show, and they basically were saying, a lot less 10-cent items, more $10 items are now being given away. People want quality. Because yeah, they want something that lasts, they want something that's useful, and they want something that is not going to break apart. But not only because that's a bad quality and a bad reflection of your brand, but also because of the impact on the environment, right? And we're just going to
yeah,
throw that out. It's just going to end up in a landfill, and that's not good. There's a lot more awareness of that, and so some of the trends that we've been seeing and I've been seeing is that more use of recycled materials in
hmm,
whatever you're giving away, more items that have a longer shelf life. So things like a steel thermos rather than those plastic ones. A really nice throw blanket that you can use, to snuggle up in while you're binging Netflix, right? These aren't items that you're going to avoid everybody. But again, going back to that, what we talked about at the beginning, when you know it's your high prospect coming or a really valuable customer coming, then, you're probably okay
have
giving them a
something
blanket.
nice for them.
Right.
Yeah,
Because you're not going to be handing out 100 of these. You're going to be handing out 20, 25 of these, right? And that's a much better use of your swag budget than having 5,000 pens, right? We're seeing a trend towards that. Food. There's definitely a lot more food being given away as the swag item rather than an actual hard good
what
item
kind of
that
food are
people
we
would.
talking, Colin?
Oh, well, don't get me started. So, cookies are always great. I mean, lots of people having fresh baked cookies, popcorn, always popular. We've seen a lot of churros recently. Pretzels now have made a resurgence. Macaroons, or I've seen actually a lot of chocolate. Um,
Oh, I like
so
that.
branded
I like
branded
everything I'm
chocolate.
hearing. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
and of course,
the branded chocolate. That's even better. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, coffee, right? Number one thing is probably coffee, espresso, cappuccinos, lattes. Those are always really
absolutely.
good giveaways.
Yeah. And again, the good stuff.
Yeah. And I will say one thing. So, the coffee stations are very popular and, obviously it takes a few minutes to make an espresso and some of these more fancy drinks. And people do love them because it's a nice decadent treat after a long day spent at the conference. But there's a huge missed opportunity that I see over and over. And that is you got this lineup and then there's nobody talking to anybody in the line except the barista. Like to me, it's like, where are your salespeople? Where are your marketing people? Why
Oh
are you
my
not engaging
God,
these
that is
people, this
such a
captive
great
audience?
point. It's the obvious thing. Oh my goodness.
So yeah, missed opportunity. So if you're going to have a coffee and you're going to have a line, make sure you have enough people manning your booth to actually engage people in that line. It's such a missed opportunity. You've spent all that money getting a barista there.
Man, this is a great
Make
point.
use of
I
it.
mean, I'm sitting here going, wait, you kind of have like a little mini focus group right there. You could, get a few people all talking at once. And that is a really great point and a great tip. Thank you for that. So we are recording this. It is April 10th that we're sitting here recording this, and by the time this airs, your conference, the Swaay.Health Marketing Conference, coming up in May, potentially has already passed. However, I would love it if you would tell us a little bit about the Swaay.Health Marketing Conference What can people expect there? It looks like you've got a great lineup, a lot of great topics. Tell us a little bit more about that and why people should attend.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. So, the Swaay.Health live event it's our annual conference. This is the conference that we've been running for 12 years under the brand of HITMC, is the HITMC conference from before, or the HITMC conference. This is the first year under our rebranded banner that we're calling it the Swaay.Health Live event. And yeah, it's basically a gathering of the community. So it's not meant to be like pure education. It's also not meant to be just a fun. It's sort of a blend of the two. It's for a lot of us, marketing is a pretty lonely function, right? Like
No doubt.
and especially out there's a lot of solo marketers. So this is really an opportunity to get together with your peers, to complain about the same things and to realize you're in the same boat as everyone else, right? And the good news is there's solutions, there's tips and tricks that you can pick up. And so this is really a community gathering rather than a traditional educational conference. And so it's 100% focused on healthcare marketing, PR, and communications. The sessions that we have are all designed to offer the latest best practices and strategies and things to help you either attract more patients, improve your patient experience, or to build up your funnel and convert people better. So all of really practical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the sessions and the speakers all come from the industry. Like they're basically your peers that are
Yeah.
presenting. One of the things that we are doing unique this year is we're putting a lot less focus on lectures. So on purpose, we have very, very few lectures this year and have gone much more with panels, fireside chats, ask me anythings, workshops. And one of the new formats that we're trying are debates.
Oh,
So
how's
we
that going to
actually,
work?
yeah. So if you remember back to high school, the teacher handing you, but dividing you up into two teams and giving you a topic, and one side was arguing for it and the other side was arguing against it. That is exactly what we're going to be doing on a couple of really interesting topics. So, for example, we have a set of debates for should you be using AI for content creation in
Oh,
healthcare?
yeah, that's a good
And then
one.
we're going to have one side arguing for it, and we're going to have one side arguing against it. The topic you and I
I
are talking
love
about here on
that.
this podcast. We're going to have people arguing, are conferences worth the squeeze in healthcare? Is it still worthwhile making in-person events part of your marketing mix? Is social media still viable as a channel for hospitals or for a health IT company? So we're going to have a series of these hot topics that we're going to debate it. And the idea of these debates is not so much to declare a winner.
Yeah.
It's really to explore the topic from both sides, right? To hear some good points and then to hear some reasons why you might want to do it, not want to do it, and then make your own judgment at the end of it. So
And I
that's the
love
goal
that
of these.
idea. I can't wait. I can't wait to witness that. I'm gonna get
Yeah,
a lot of good
it's going to be a lot
information
of
on
fun.
that. That kind of reminds me, speaking of marketing and branding, several years ago, I had a friend and he was with, do you remember Lewis Communications? And they did a lot of branding, worked with a lot
Mhm.
of academic medical centers and probably still do. But I remember they had this like campaign and that they were launching for Duke. And it was a series of, what you're talking about. They were going to bring two, folks together to have a debate on a topic, and they were branding it Duke It Out. And it's for Duke. I was like, that's brilliant. I love that. And they came up with, like some little boxing things. But anyway, you can have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff. So that's a great idea. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, and one of the things that our conferences have always been known for, and we're continuing, is this concept called an unconference. So we have baked into the agenda some unconferences, and basically what this is an opportunity for the attendees to set the agenda. So it's a discussion group. I think that would be the other name for it. We gather in small groups and talk about a particular topic, and this is a chance for attendees to have their questions answered or have their challenges kind of brought forward. And there's a lot of people walk away from those sessions, those unconference sessions, going, wow, that alone made the whole conference worth it. I got the answer. I got 10 tips from my colleague over here at another company that's done exactly what I was facing. And the other people chimed in. So it's a really great, we've had, discussions on, content marketing. We've had discussions on privacy issues and challenges that people are facing, how to, better design websites and everything like that. So these unconference sessions also make sure that people are getting value from being at the conference itself.
That's awesome. You're not a one-man show over there, are you? There's so much going on. How do you do it all?
No, thankfully we have a very good team of people. Obviously John, and he's the guy who founded the HITMC community way back when, and he's the chief editor of Healthcare IT Today. And then we have Brittany. She's been with us now for almost 4 years now, and she's does all the logistics and all of the planning, and
Awesome.
and then we have a team of Bonnie and Haley and Lizeth and so many others that help us pull off these events.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It is
That's
a lot
awesome.
of work.
Well, thank you for doing it. I know the community, is so grateful. So we'll look forward to that. Speaking of grateful, I don't know if there's really like a grateful question, but okay, aside from Swaay.Health Marketing Conference, let's put that, over here. If you could choose only one health IT conference to attend, or maybe just even one health conference, doesn't have to be health IT, right? Which one would it be and why?
Wow, you're really going to put me on the spot to pick my favorite one,
if you don't
right?
feel comfortable answering that because you might piss some people off, that's fine. We can cut this out.
No. So, first of all, any conference in Hawaii, can I answer it like that? Like that would be
sir.
great.
Yes. Aloha.
Look at that would be my favorite. Well, I'll say this. So the type of conference that is my favorite to go to are user conferences.
Those are great.
I find them great. And it's not because the companies go all out and there's always like a really cool party or anything. It's not that. It's just that when you're at a user conference, most of the users there are pretty happy to be there, and they're eager to learn, and they're really wanting to connect with people at the company. So I just find that there's a natural energy at a user conference that doesn't happen at some of the larger conferences.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And everyone seems to be there for the same purpose, right? They're all there to learn about the latest features and functions. They're all there to kind of
saying, to experience share, right? And be like, hey, what did you do about this?
Exactly. So I love those conferences because there is that energy. And also, a lot of companies now are doing major announcements and major things at their own conferences. And so from a news standpoint, there's a lot more stuff to cover, right? And
you do get invited to some of these because, I also work with, not just one or two. There's a number of clients, that we work with that they don't want to invite the media because they think that it's going to make, their customers less likely to speak openly. And I'm like, you could still invite the media to like the big session or, the big reveal or something like that. You don't have to have them at every single, invite them to everything. But it sounds like there's lots of companies that they really do open the door and invite the media in.
Yeah, and I think more and more are open to the idea. I think that the concern you brought up is valid, right? Like as if I was on that side and having been on that side, you're always a little bit cautious of, well, what are they going to hear? What are they going to uncover? Maybe there's a disgruntled employee who wants to air something out to the media. Yes, that can be all concerns, but I think for the most part, media are pretty like I can speak for us. We're after the good news stories. We're after the stories of talking about who has deployed something successfully so that other people can learn from that success. So we're certainly not there to dig up dirt on a company. And I think once a marketing department kind of understands that and has that kind of knowledge and relationship with members of the media, like for example with us, then I think they get more comfortable and they realize, they're not going to go and secretly interview somebody.
You're not going to be doing gotcha stories, gotcha journalism.
Right. And I got to tell you, when that happens, magic happens, because I can tell you that when I speak to some of these clients, these smaller rural hospitals, these organizations that aren't the big ones that everyone hears about all the time, they're very eager to tell their good news story because they want their community to know all the work that they're putting in to improve staff experience or to make something easier for patients or better for patients. And they don't have an outlet for that, except sometimes us at the user conference. Mm-hmm. And so I really enjoy hearing those stories because these are probably healthcare organizations that I would never have had a chance to speak with at any other place because they're not going to HIMSS, right? They're not
Mhm.
going to Vive. And so this is the only place where I get a chance to meet with them. So I really enjoy some of these stories because they're always so resourceful. Like that's the thing that strikes me all the time about some of these smaller organizations. They're so resourceful and they're so passionate about doing something good for their community. And just when you interview them, that energy and that love comes out, and that makes for a fantastic interview. So I do love user conferences. So it's not like a specific user conference. I just like user conferences in general.
That's great. I did not expect that answer at all. So thank you for that. And I'm going to use this a little bit with some of my clients that don't want to invite the media to their user conferences, because you're right. They're great, and they're great stories, and they come because they love them, and they love like the collaborative nature of that relationship that they have. So great point. Okay, well, so we're running out of time here, unfortunately, and I do love to close my podcast with a burning question or two. So we're at that point in the program for me to say, what's your favorite form of media?
That is a loaded question, but I will answer it. It is video. I mean, I would never have thought I would say this, but because I'm a reader, I read lots and lots of books. I've always read a lot of books. I
Mhm.
loved reading magazines, printed ones. But today it's video. First of all, so creative, right? There's so many creative videos out there, from the fun ones you see on TikTok to the super interesting ones you see on Instagram to the ones that they're very educational ones that you see on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I consume a lot of my knowledge and things now via YouTube and via video. And so that is my favorite form of media. And also, I think there's a lot of play in terms of creativity, right? It's really hard to get creative
Mhm.
with written word. I mean, other than fiction, right? Because in
Yeah.
B2B writing, even that, there's a certain format to it. There's only so much you can do, right? But on video, you can get really creative, and you can really play off the other people that you're interviewing with. And so I think video for me now has become my favorite form of media. I just enjoy consuming that.
Yeah, it seems like, for the conference coverage too, it allows you to get a lot more, like maybe a lot more interviews in, a lot more content in, and then, kick it out really pretty quickly too.
Can I tell you a fun story? I'm
Yeah,
gonna sound
please
like
do.
I'm gonna sound like a geek, but because I didn't have any formal media training, like I am like I've got this imposter syndrome, right? So I'm like, I got to learn. How do I do video better? How do I stand better? So I'm like, so I find myself analyzing documentaries and news coverage, not because of the news coverage, but because, oh, that looked really good. So I'm like sitting there going, well, how are they standing? How is the reporter standing? Where were they standing? And what shot the angle did they choose? And like, what are they saying? How could they pack so much information in 30 seconds? So I actually study it like tape.
That's
Like,
beautiful. That's like, curiosity at its finest, right? You're really diving in. Well, so what do you use for your video creation? Are you a one man show in that regard when you're at the conferences? Are you using your phone?
no, well, no, I mean, yeah, I did at the start, but
Yeah.
now, we have a lot of toys. So now I have, my handy dandy, camera that I travel with that I,
Nice.
I do my videos with. We do have a videographer that we use. He's awesome. Doug, he's great. We bring him to some of the larger conferences where we're shooting like 10 or 15 videos.
Hmm.
But for some of the smaller conferences, it's just a one man band. We got our cameras and we just set it up and we start talking. So, but yeah, I'm learning every day and I'm making horrible mistakes every day. But hopefully every day we're also getting a little
You
bit
doing the
better. But it's
editing
a lot of fun.
too?
No, well, for some of the videos, because we produce them, we publish them like that night, and
Yeah.
so those ones I sometimes edit myself, and then other ones we have someone on our team. She's very good, and she will help us do the more fancy videos that are longer
Yeah.
form interviews. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, keep on keeping on. Okay, one more burning question and then we're going to wrap up. Okay, other than AI, what are we going to be talking about this year?
I hope that what we're going to be talking about is the recovery, the economic recovery, and the lowering
Yes,
of interest
please.
rates. Right? Like, I think all of us would go, I would want to be talking about that in the latter half
Yeah.
of 2024.
AI
But
driven economic recovery.
there you go. But barring that, and barring the Toronto Maple Leafs winning the Stanley Cup, what I think we'll be talking about at the end of this year, and what I'm hearing certainly is the focus on privacy and cybersecurity. I mean,
Yeah.
it is the second biggest topic right now of discussion, right? And it's not just because of what happened at Change. It's just in general, healthcare is a soft target, or has traditionally been a soft target, and it is a life and death situation, right? Unlike so many other industries, somebody goes after a retailer, it's just hitting their bottom line. But in healthcare, it literally means lives, and so there's so I think some of the threats that healthcare is facing, the infrastructure that we need to invest in to protect ourselves, I think cybersecurity and data privacy are definitely going to be the hot topics for the rest of the year that we're going to be talking about. Sometimes for all the wrong reasons, and sometimes for all the right reasons of finding better ways to use the data that we have collected for the improvement of care and the improvement of patient experience and so forth. So I think that's going to be the second biggest topic of the rest of the year, other than AI.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's also the silver lining of the Change Healthcare event, because, it does a lot of investments in infrastructure have been put off, not unlike just the infrastructure around us, in our world every day. But then when something like that happens and everybody sees the impact of it, suddenly it's a top issue, and it starts to get, attention at the highest levels. So maybe there's a silver lining there.
I hope so.
Well, this has been so great, Colin. Thank you again for joining me. You have so much knowledge, and thank you for your passion and your curiosity, and for showing up and for, reporting out, to those of us in the industry. We count on you. So, I'm a former journalist from way back in the beginning of my career, and I'm just always, so grateful when there's great journalists. And I know you said you didn't start off as one, but here you are doing a great job. So keep up the great work.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I really do appreciate those comments.
Yeah. Well, as always, we will include links and background in our show notes. So for our listeners out there, please be sure to check out those on our website, growwithfuoco.com/How It's Done podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. You can also find Colin at Swaay, that's SWAAY.health. Again, my guest today has been Colin Hung, Chief Editor at Swaay.Health and an editor at Healthcare IT Today. Thank you so much, Colin.
That's it for now. Thanks so much for listening. We're looking forward to keeping great conversations coming your way as we grow this podcast. There's even more great content from our conversations on our blog. Be sure to check it out at growwithfuoco.com. That's Grow with Fuoco, FUOCO.com. Stay tuned until next time, and no matter what, stay curious.